It was 3 months ago tonight when the president posted online a video depicting former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama as if they were apes. President Trump did later take it down. He refused to apologize for it and still hasn't to this day. That was 3 months ago. It was 5 months ago when Donald Trump confirmed something that he had previously long denied. Back in his first term, President Trump had told a group of senators at the White House that he thought it was terrible that immigrants to America were from S-hole countries. And according to reporting at the time, he named some predominantly black countries, and he said they were S-hole countries, and couldn't we instead have immigrants from predominantly white countries? He mentioned Norway. Since countries with white populations are apparently good, and countries with black populations are swear words. So Donald Trump said that in his first term, and when it was reported that he had said that, he denied it. He said he had never, ever used that language. But then just a few months ago, he started bragging proudly. Weirdly, at a speech in Pennsylvania, he started bragging that, yes, actually, despite all those earlier denials, of course, he had used that term, and moreover, he still believes it. Predominantly black countries are S-hole countries. This administration, I think it's clear from just the repeated daily news cycle. I think this administration is bad at everything they set their mind to. They're terrible in the courts, to the point where, like, their performance in court jeopardizes the law licenses of everybody who speaks for them. They're terrible in the court of public opinion, which you can see in the polls, which is going to have a big political impact on them the next time people get a chance to vote for them en masse. They're terrible, really terrible, at all the technocratic, practical stuff a government is supposed to do, including, like, basic stuff like the weather. They're terrible at war, terrible at diplomacy. They're even terrible at hiding the ball in terms of how much this president does whatever Vladimir Putin wants, even when it makes no sense for us. They're just not great. They're bad at basically everything they try to do. But on the issue of race, on the treatment of African Americans specifically, even being terrible at what they're doing has still proven to be disastrous for our country. And it is, in part, the posturing and the messaging and the racist vibes from the White House and the president. That is stuff that validates and excites the worst bigots in the country, and that is consequential. But it's more than that, too. We are now about 16 months into what has been from day one a concerted and intense targeting of black Americans, specifically by this president and by this administration. On his first full day in office, he proclaims war on diversity efforts, not only in government, but in any institution in the country over which he can exert leverage, everything from schools and universities to law firms to private businesses of every stripe. He then immediately started firing some of the highest profile black public officials in the whole U.S. government, seemingly regardless of any other thing about them. I mean, right away, we get the firing of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Charles C.Q. Brown. We get the firing of the Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden. And then it's Gwynne Wilcox from the National Labor Relations Board. And then it's Robert Primus, the chair of the Surface Transportation Board. And then it's Alvin Brown from the NTSB. And then it's Peggy Carr, the head of the National Center for Education Statistics. And then it's Willie Phillips from FERC, from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And then it's Lisa Cook from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, and on and on and on. When Trump and his top political donor, Elon Musk, then started just lopping off huge swaths of the federal government to disastrous practical effect, the largest and most egregious cuts targeted federal agencies that employed a disproportionate number of black employees. Reporter Erica Green wrote about this a few months ago for The Times, noting that nothing had moved backwards in the federal government for black Americans this quickly or this far in over 100 years. Since Woodrow Wilson came in 1912 and resegregated the federal workforce. Quote, black employees were fired or demoted to lower-level jobs, relegated to separate and inferior lunchrooms and other facilities, and accused of making white women feel unsafe. Those who remained were humiliated. A black worker in the Postal Service was surrounded by screens, so white workers would not have to look at him. Another employee had a cage built around him to separate him from his white counterparts. A clerk in the Treasury Secretary's office was assigned to rewrite all correspondence to address black employees by their first names. The way Trump addressed the Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden, by her first name when he crowed publicly about firing her for no reason. In the year of our Lord, 2025, and now 2026, this president and this administration is not just inheriting that history from the Wilson administration, it's furthering it in its own ways. Since 1965, there has been an executive order in effect. It was signed by Lyndon Johnson, 1965. Since 1965, all federal contractors have been banned by executive order from discriminating on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or national origin. Donald Trump rescinded that 1965 rule on his first full day in office. Less than a month later, Trump announced another rule change. They rescinded Clause 52.222-21 of the Federal Acquisition Regulation, which doesn't sound like much, but I'll tell you what the title of that is. It's Prohibition of Segregated Facilities. That's what Trump rescinded less than 1 month into being back in the White House. That section reads, quote, the contractor agrees that it does not and will not maintain or provide for its employees any segregated facilities at any of its establishments, and that it does not and will not permit its employees to perform their services at any location under its control where segregated facilities are maintained. That anti-segregation clause has been in government contracts for decades. Donald Trump overtly reached out to rescind it, which means, bluntly, that the federal government no longer explicitly prohibits contractors from having segregated restaurants, waiting rooms, and drinking fountains. Make America great again, right? Recently fired and sidelined employees in the Department of Housing and Urban Development have started sounding the alarm that the Trump administration is no longer, just bluntly no longer enforcing a federal law known as the Fair Housing Act. Fair Housing Act, another pillar of the civil rights movements and its achievements. The Fair Housing Act dates to 1968. It says you can't refuse to rent to someone or refuse to sell a house to someone on account of their race or their color or religion or national origin or any other factor against which we're supposed to be protected from discrimination. According to current and former employees of the Department of Housing and Urban Development under Donald Trump, they have dropped enforcement of the Federal Housing Act. In Trump's first year back in office, black unemployment spiked in this country from 6.2% all the way up to 7.5%, making it the highest of all racial groups. Under Joe Biden, black unemployment had been at a record low of 4.8%, spiking now under Donald Trump. The Trump administration, generally speaking, is bad at its work. It is bad at what it sets its mind to in all sorts of ways. But black Americans, African Americans, have been targeted by this administration in a concerted way that has nevertheless been devastating, even though the Trump administration isn't good at anything they set their mind to. And that was all before the conservative majority on the U.S. Supreme Court, including all of Trump's appointees, voted to effectively end the Voting Rights Act a few days ago. As soon as the court said they would take up that case, people started mapping the worst-case scenario for what Trump and the Republicans would do, particularly in the South, if the court gutted the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the crowning achievement of the civil rights movement. And the before and after looks like the snapback after the end of Reconstruction, after the Civil War. I mean, look at the state of Louisiana there. A third of the population of Louisiana is black. Louisiana's Republican governor canceled congressional elections that are already underway in that state to rush through new maps that will presumably make sure that even though 1/3 of the population of that state is black, there will be no black representation in Congress for Louisiana at all. South Carolina, 1/4 of the population is black. They have one majority-minority district represented by an African-American Democrat, Jim Clyburn. They are going to try to get rid of that one black district so that South Carolina is all white, all Republican in representation, while 1/4 of the people who live in that state are black. In Tennessee, 1 in 6 residents is black. Republicans now want to make sure all 9 congressional seats in Tennessee are white. All 9 of them. They want it to be 9 to nothing, white and Republican, when 1 in 6 people in that state is black. In her dissent from the majority ruling, Justice Elena Kagan said it will likely cause the largest reduction to minority representation since the end of Reconstruction. She probably didn't need to use the word likely there. The war on black Americans that is being waged by this president and this Republican Party is one of the only things they have put their mind to in this past year that they've actually done pretty well at. A comprehensive attack on black public officials and black public power. A comprehensive attack on black public officials in the federal government, black employees in the federal government, black representatives in Congress, and now all around the country, where everywhere Republicans are in charge, they are scrambling to make sure that black public officials can no longer hold office. We're going to talk tonight about the pushback against that and the strategies to make them pay for it, both in Louisiana, which is ground zero here, and around the country. We're going to talk tonight about some surprising pushback from churches and the clergy. We're going to talk tonight about a blistering takedown of Trump and the administration in federal court in Washington in a most unexpected case. But big picture here, we are in the middle of something really radical in this country, not just to get rid of our constitutional republic, to replace our form of government with something else, but to get rid of the multiracial democracy that our Constitution is supposed to protect. It is a war on black America. The fight to save it is looking like it's going to be the fight of all of our lives.